All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Thursday evening Parent Academy webinar session. I am Tina Foston Hayes, the Parent Academy Specialist for Alachua County Public Schools, and I welcome you this evening. We are going to have our guest speaker joining us from Peaceful Paths. Miss Hannah is going to come and talk to us about some teen dating violence. And so we just want to make sure that our parents are up on all of the tips that she has to offer to keep our kiddos safe. And just before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping elements. If you would please keep your microphones on mute due to duration of the presentation. We will be monitoring your questions using the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your webinar window. If you have any needs for any personal conversations, please feel free to email me at parentacademy@gm.sbac.edu, and I will get to those questions. If I cannot answer them, I'll definitely get you forwarded over to the correct person that can. Just please note that all Parent Academy webinars are closed captioned and recorded and posted to our website for a re-review at a later date for anyone that could not join us live tonight. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Miss Hannah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. As Tina said, I am from Peaceful Paths Domestic Abuse Network. We serve all survivors of intimate partner violence in Alachua, Bradford, and Union counties. And our agency is happy to be working with you and speaking today about teen dating violence. So let's get into it. If I can get my screen to work. All right, so as parents, you have an incredible opportunity to lay the groundwork for children and for their future relationships. And one of the things that's most important for healthy relationships is healthy boundaries. And there's a quote by a famous psychologist that says, children have boundaries unless they are shown or told it isn't okay to have them. So it's really important that we acknowledge children's limits when they say no, their wants, their boundaries, because we're teaching them through our honoring of their boundaries that their needs matter, right? That self-care and their comfort, it's important. And like I said, our relationship with our caregivers creates a mental blueprint for what we should expect from others in the future. So when we raise children that set healthy boundaries, we're encouraging that for their future, right? But in order to raise children that set those healthy boundaries, it requires adults to hold space for them and allow them to maybe to disagree respectfully, and to assertively share how they feel. So, a good question for parents is, are we modeling situations where we're telling kids, maybe on accident, that other people's feelings are more important than theirs? So some examples, right? If you are at a family function and you say, go hug this relative, it would make them really sad if you don't give them a hug. Oh, you have to go over to this person's house. They'll be so disappointed if you don't come, right? Maybe the child says, I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to give that person a hug, or I don't feel well. I'd rather stay home, right? But we're telling them, you need to abandon your needs. You need to abandon your limits. You need to abandon what feels comfortable and good for you to make someone else happy. So we want to be really mindful of our messaging. And maybe that means saying to a kid, hey, you don't have to hug that person if that makes you uncomfortable. You're feeling sick? Well, let's tell them you don't feel well, right? Another really important thing to model, in addition to respecting children's boundaries, is healthy communication. So this is kind of Peaceful Paths gold star gold star method for assertive communication. And it's called the I feel statement recipe. And it goes like this. It goes, I feel blank when, because, and then you ask for something you need in the future. And it's really important, as I said, for children to have this modeling at home, for them to be able to practice this at home so that they can go out into the world and expect this level of respectful communication in their relationships. If children are used to assertive, healthy communication, they're not going to be very happy or tolerate maybe more aggressive communication styles. And they may be empowered to advocate for themselves with their peers, with their future relationships, and even adults in their world in a respectful way. So, for example, when you are communicating with these kids, you could talk about your feelings honestly, right? Maybe they do something that hurts your feelings. Maybe they behave in a way that's not maybe acceptable to you. You could say, I felt disrespected when you spoke to me like that, because your tone was really harsh. I need you to take a deep breath before we have a conversation so that we can talk to each other with respect. And then encourage your children to use this I feel statement recipe themselves. And it's really important they don't have to do this verbatim, right? Not all of us say, I feel when, because it's kind of robotic. But what we want to teach kids and what we want to teach adults even is that it's really important to center how you feel as opposed to what someone did wrong. So I felt this way versus blame. You made me upset, right? You acted this way and that was terrible, right? We don't want to assume what someone did or why someone did something. We want to say, hey, I don't know if it was your intention, but this was the outcome. I felt hurt. I felt unheard. I felt rejected. I felt lonely. And practice letting kids name their feelings, right? You could print out a feelings wheel and say, hey, look at this wheel. What feeling do you most feel like right now? And kind of get them, help assist them as they communicate in this way. So we've talked about boundaries, right? How vital it is to respect kids' boundaries, how vital it is to encourage them to engage in healthy communication and to model that healthy communication with them as well. But we also want to encourage consent language and bodily autonomy. So one of those boundaries I talked about as an example was, right, maybe they don't want to hug this relative, right? And it's really important that we engage in consensual language. So we ask them before we do things, right? Obviously, there are situations where safety is at risk or where kids don't have a choice, they have to do something. But if a child does have a choice, maybe let them make it, right? Empower them to have choices. Hey, can I play with you? Hey, can I color with you? Hey, can I tie your shoes? Hey, can I help you with this thing? Do you want space? Do you want to be alone? Right? When we can, we want to allow kids to have choice and then respect their answer, right? And we're teaching them that their voice matters and that their boundaries matter. And there are all sorts of types of boundaries. I'm saying this to y'all who are presumably adults, right? But you can also teach your kids about all of these different types of boundaries. So there are physical boundaries. That one's obvious, right? That includes our personal space, touch, whether or not we like hugs, high fives, right? And you can teach your kids they should always ask for consent when it comes to physical boundaries. Do your kids ask for hugs? Or do they just run up and hug people? Should people ask your kiddos before they give them a hug or touch their body? Maybe, right? Emotional boundaries, young people may not know much about what those are, but they're the limits we set with our feelings, right? So if someone's telling us how to feel, if someone's saying, you shouldn't be upset right now, that's stupid. Or if they're pressuring us to talk about something we're not comfortable with, right? If someone's crying and we say, you have to tell me what's wrong. Our kids may have emotional boundaries with us and we might be able to respect them, right? They had a hard day. I don't want to talk about it right now. That's an emotional limit that they're trying to set. And if it's not unsafe, we might say, okay, can we talk about this later when you're ready, right? Intellectual boundaries have to do with ideas, right? So we could teach kids that it's okay for us to have different thoughts. It's okay to disagree, but someone should still respect you, right? Even if we disagree, no one should be belittling you, making fun of you, criticizing you because you have different ideas, right? Material, if you have multiple kids, if they have siblings, right? Sibling groups, material boundaries are a huge hot topic, right? This person stole my shirt, they ate my food in the fridge. Talk about material boundaries in your home, right? That your stuff is your stuff. And we have to ask consent before we use other people's stuff. And time. We should set time limits for ourselves and others, right? So maybe your kids don't have the best time boundaries when it comes to homework and studying. And you could have a conversation with them about how we can set healthy time limits for ourselves. And if they have friends or people in their life that are constantly texting them or calling them or demanding of their time, you can have conversations about how they can set those boundaries. But an important thing for everyone to know, and especially young people, is that all of this has to do with respect. And it's really important for boundaries to be respected. But on a fun note, there are actually some pretty common emotional boundary violations that parents make with their kids without even realizing it. And it's important to talk about this because they can be pretty harmful, and they are often, they're not intentional. So if we expect children to provide emotional support or validation, right, that can actually violate their emotional boundaries. As adults, right, it's important to regulate and speak to maybe another adult about how you're feeling before expecting a kiddo who's still learning and growing themselves to hold space for your emotions, right? We want to avoid gossiping or complaining about children with their other parent, guardians, family members. That can be hard, right? We may have some choice words about somebody in the family, but we want to respect this kiddo's emotional boundaries and their maybe right to have relationships with other people and avoid putting them in the middle. We don't want to be dismissive of a child's feelings and say that they're trivial or they're dramatic, right? That's an emotional boundary violation. It matters to them. So we want to show that we care. And then sharing age and appropriate information, right? If a kid is 8, right, it may not be appropriate to talk about this really complex or intense situation with them. We might have to age it down so that it's appropriate for them. All right, so this is a really important slide. A lot of people don't know what boundaries are and what boundaries are not. So boundaries are not control. Boundaries are not telling someone what they have to do. It's about communicating as the individual setting the boundary what you're going to do to take care of yourself, because other people can make whatever decisions they want to make. But the person setting the boundary is going to say, if you choose to make this choice, here's what I'm going to do to protect myself. So we like to tell young people, we like to show them this slide and say, instead of saying something like, you can't talk to me like that, we might say, if you talk to me like that, I'm going to hang up the phone. Why would you ask that could become, I'm not comfortable answering that question. You need to give me my stuff back, versus if you're not going to respect my things, I can't let you borrow them. And, talking about how we can only control ourselves. We cannot control other people, but we can protect our peace and do the best we can do to set healthy limits. So we want to encourage kiddos to ask themselves these questions. Am I comfortable with this? Did I do something just because I wanted someone else to be happy? Because I was scared I was going to get in trouble? Because I wanted to fit in? What do I want? Who am I? What's my voice, right? Is it okay if their boundaries change? Yes. You can tell kiddos, if you say yes to something one day, it's okay to change your mind and set a boundary about it later. And ask them to pay attention to how people respond when they set boundaries. Is there a friend who's constantly pressuring them, constantly making them feel bad when they say no? Even a family member, right? You can tell them to take note of that and to recognize that maybe that's not the most respectful situation or the healthiest. So to kind of put a bow around this whole boundaries conversation, we want our kids to speak up and find their voice, especially if something's making them uncomfortable, and that they shouldn't do things because they think they should, right? Okay, so in addition to, so we've walked through quite a few important building blocks. We've talked about healthy communication with I feel statements. We've talked about boundaries. We've talked about consent. But it's also really important for young people to understand what makes relationships healthy, unhealthy, and even abusive. And young people should know that a healthy relationship is not necessarily perfect, right? There are no perfect relationships in the world. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to say things we might regret, and that's understandable. But healthy relationships should always feel safe, equal, and respectful. And in unhealthy or abusive relationships, there's a foundational lack of this respect for boundaries. And rather than treating you as their equal, this person tries to pressure, manipulate, and control. And we actually use something called the power and control wheel to understand abusive relationships. We have an adult version of this wheel, but teen dating violence is very prevalent. I will have statistics about how common relationship abuse is in teen relationships. It's incredibly common. So it's important to understand this framework of what an abusive relationship looks like, especially for the dynamics that young people may have. So they may experience emotional abuse, right? So that's putting a partner down, making them feel bad about themselves, chipping away at their self-esteem, gaslighting them, right? Telling them you're crazy or making it hard for them to trust their version of reality. Isolation and exclusion can be extremely prevalent, especially in high school or middle school environments, right? Where they could say, I'm going to tell all of our friends not to sit with you. Or isolation in a relationship could look like, I don't want you hanging out with those people, and using jealousy to justify that, right? You should only be with me. Maybe encouraging this person to cut off their social supports, their family, their friends, so that they're ultimately easier to control. Pressuring sexual boundaries is part of this power and control wheel. I'm going to talk very specifically about what digital abuse looks like. But another facet of this control would be minimizing, denying, blame. Somebody who never takes accountability for their actions, shifts responsibility and says, I only did this because you made me upset, right? You're the reason I acted this way. It's really important to tell kids this, especially, even if there is no physical violence, a relationship can still be abusive. And one way that occurs is fear, right? Oftentimes abusers use fear to try to control someone, um, through looks, actions, gestures. Um, Maybe they're explosive and volatile in arguments. Maybe they threaten to spread rumors about them through the school, or threaten to kill themselves if they break up, or threaten to hurt this person. And that fear can be a really intense factor that may keep someone in a relationship that feels unsafe. And then social status, gender privilege, they might say, I'm the man of the relationship, I make all the decisions. And abuse is about power and control. So this person may try to levy any control or power they have in the world. And peer pressure, right? We've kind of talked about that throughout this wheel, but the dynamics of a high school or a middle school can be pretty intense, and they can be weaponized to make someone feel more isolated, more hurt. So it's real, and we want adults to know that teen dating violence happens a lot, and it's a serious issue. As far as digital dating abuse, 25 to 50% of young people, 14 to 24, have experienced some form of digital dating abuse. So that's when a partner uses technology or social media to bully, harass, stalk, or intimidate their partner. And it could look various ways. It could look like constantly blowing up someone's phone with texts, those threats, right? Threatening to post or forward pictures, personal information, harm someone's reputation at school, demanding access to passwords for social media accounts, hacking social media accounts and posting certain things, pressuring young people to send sexual messages, or tracking their location and demanding to know where they are at all times. And then finally, monitoring or influencing who they're allowed to follow. This is all control. And heavy monitoring is a huge part of the power and control wheel, right? They may say, I need to know where you are, because I'm worried about you. But it's really possession, right? I want to know where you are so I can have more control because I don't trust you. So ask your kiddos some important questions, right? Check in about their digital safety. Do they have public or private accounts? Have you safety planned or discussed if they are pressured for sexual pictures, if they've ever received explicit messages? Are they constantly logged into apps? Do they have their location sharing on? Are they sharing their location with their friends? Are they sharing their location with people if they're allowed to date, right? And we want to encourage them best we can to avoid location sharing unless it's with safe, trusted adults and people in their world, right? So I'm flying, we're going fast. But signs to look for if you are worried about a young person, right? And I think these signs can kind of be things to check in on in general, right? Showing signs of anxiety, depression, mood changes. If they change their clothing style, so this could be potentially to cover up. Maybe they're trying to cover up bruises or markings, or maybe the person that they're dating is saying, you have to dress more conservative, right? I don't want you to look this way in front of our friends or other people. If their grades are failing, they're isolating, they're not coming to their favorite activities or club meetings. If they're not as social with their peers, again, that isolation piece is part of power and control. They could be isolating because they're being told to. They could also be isolating because of mental health factors that have ramped up. If their changes are in sleep patterns, they're sleeping too much, not enough, their eating patterns are shifting. This is just general cause for concern. But of course, if we see marks or bruises, especially around the head and neck region, and we want to look for, a pattern. We don't want to just look for an isolated incident, one thing happening, and just assume that it's teen dating violence. But when or if you were to see these warning signs, talk to your kids, right? Check in. How are things going? And recognize that they might not open up at first, right? They might feel like, I'm not ready to talk about what's going on. And this is just in general, but you want to keep asking, right? Keep showing your interest in a caring and supportive way, not a pressuring way, just, I'm here. I'm here for you if you want to talk. We, again, don't want to be dismissive. We talked a little bit earlier about emotional boundaries. So we don't want to be dismissive of their feelings, their fears, and also their relationships. A lot of people think that teen dating relationships are not as serious. It's not a real relationship. It couldn't be further from the truth, especially based on what we see with teen dating violence and how intense and concerning relationships can get for high school or young people. And we want to recognize that peer intersections could heighten their experience, could make it worse, right? There could be multiple people at school who are involved. It could be that their friends are giving them not the best advice, right? And if there is abuse in a relationship for a kid or for a teen, it often requires a team effort. It requires maybe going to the school, working with counselors, if the police need to be involved, or legal departments, right? There are a lot of systems that may need to come together to support this youth, and a lot of minors will need adults to help them navigate these systems. The problem is teens need adults to navigate these systems, but 86% of teens in violent relationships were far more likely to talk to their friend about it than an adult. This is very concerning, right? A teenager may not know what to do. They may encourage this person to stay quiet. They may tell them it's their fault, right? They may make it worse. And so we might ask ourselves as adults, as people that care about kids, why? Why is it so hard for them to talk to me if I'm a great parent, if I've proven that I'm here for them? And there might be a lot of things that they're considering that make it hard for them to talk to you, right? You may have established a boundary this child ignored or violated. You may have said, hey, you're not old enough to be dating. And then they start dating and they end up in a relationship that's scary and abusive and harmful. They may be worried about disappointing you, right? You may be not knowing they're dating somebody. They may have been coerced into a behavior they know that you'll disapprove of or fear your judgment. They may think it's their fault, which is part of abuse, right? Is victim blaming, telling someone they did things to cause being treated in a way that's harmful. And we know that's not the case, but that might be what's making it hard for them to talk about it. They may have been threatened. If we go back to that power and control wheel, we talked about how fear and intimidation and threats and coercion are all part of an abusive relationship. So there may be threats going on, they may feel ashamed and ultimately worried about what happens next. What happens if I tell my parents that this person's done this? Are they going to get in trouble? Am I ready for them to get in trouble? What if people at the school find out? What if my friends find out? What if I get in trouble, right? There's so many unknowns that can make it hard for survivors in general to come forward, and especially young people who care very much about your opinion. But having an open, safe, and supportive channel of communication with kids increases the likelihood that they'll talk to you if they do experience anything, right? But also violence in their relationships. So we want to actively listen when we're talking with teens, right? To what they do and do not want. Again, that kind of goes back to those boundaries and consent pieces that are foundational, giving kids autonomy, giving them choice. And even if, right, even if there's a situation where you would have to do something, you would have to report something, we want to hear them out and say, I know you really didn't want to do this. Here's why we have to, right? Recognize barriers that exist for them, like we talked about, that can make things feel uncomfortable, and ask open-ended questions while validating and acknowledging their feelings. And like I said, even if you have to take an avenue they don't want to take because it's for their safety, that validation is really important, right? It makes sense that you feel scared that we have to talk to the school about this. That makes total sense to me, but I'm worried about your safety, right? So there's some good examples of maybe non-supportive or supportive language. And a lot of parents, right, are very well intentioned, right? It's very scary and uncomfortable when you're worried about your kiddo. And you may feel anger if they've disobeyed one of your rules explicitly. But we want to be mindful of some non-supportive phrases or things that we could say if someone discloses relationship abuse. So if we kind of fall back on the, you're too young to be dating, right? Or you need to focus on school, not dating. This doesn't even matter, right? Being dismissive about it or punishing. I don't like the group of people you're hanging out with. Maybe blaming it on their social group. Well, this is what I told you. Don't hang out with those people. Why are you choosing to date them? We raised you better than picking this person, right? Tell them it's over. Just be done with it. Who cares? Move on. They might have actual safety concerns. So we might want to hear them out and ask, are you feeling safe? What's happened? Have they ever hurt you? Right? What are the things that are making you scared about talking about this with people, right? We don't just want to unilaterally come in and make a decision and say, this is what's happening, without asking what's actually going on and getting the full pieces of the puzzle. And then finally, a similar sentiment, right? This is why I didn't want you to date in the first place. This is why I had these rules. See, you disobeyed my rules and now something horrible happened, right? We want to really reiterate to young people and to all survivors that abuse is not their fault. They didn't do anything to cause this abuse. They didn't want this to happen. This was a choice behavior that someone made to harm them. And there's a lot of shame and guilt that they could be feeling. So we don't want to intensify those feelings of shame and guilt by reprimanding them in a time of crisis. Instead, we want to ask them, what would make you feel safe? I understand this is really hard for you to tell me this. Thank you for sharing this with me. And I want to honor that you've shared this with me, and I'm here for you. What would feel helpful for you right now? Do you want to, here are our resources, right? Would you want to talk to a counselor about this? There's a support line that we can call and we can talk to. And again, like I've said, abuse is never okay, and this is not your fault. So we can see how this is night and day, right? And that also kind of requires putting aside your feelings, right? And regulating yourself before having this conversation. You may feel like, oh, this is why I told you not to get in this situation, or this is why I told you not to hang out with these people. But that might require taking that deep breath, processing this with a safe, trusted person in your life before you can have this conversation with a young person. And we have to be willing to have those hard, uncomfortable conversations and answer questions as openly and as honestly as possible. And like we talked about, it's really important to teach your child about healthy relationships. That means safe, equal, respectful. Your boundaries get respected. Consent is an important piece of the relationship puzzle. You feel like their friends are kind to you. They build you up. They listen. There's honesty, right? Talking about all these green flags with your kiddos for friendships too. Asking them, what is a good friend? And if you are open to them dating, what does a good partner look like? And having those conversations so that they know how they should be treated. And we want to let schools know that you support healthy relationship curriculum. The CDC has determined that the most effective way to prevent dating violence in the future is education. Talking to young people, talking to them in elementary school, middle school, high school about these things. What are boundaries? What's consent? How do we regulate our feelings so that we don't take out our anger on other people? That ultimately is what changes the course of relationship abuse in the future. We want to raise assertive children who can voice their opinions and their needs respectfully, right? We don't want to just silence needs. We don't want to tell kids that their voices don't matter. We want to give them the tools to assertively and respectfully communicate how they feel and model how to disagree in a healthy way and to set those boundaries, like we said. And as I kind of mentioned with the supportive language slides, hearing that your child is experiencing teen dating violence is extremely distressing and difficult. You may feel angry, lost, frustrated, overwhelmed, like you just want to help them as best you can. So lean on your friends, your support system, people that you can talk to who can validate your feelings as well and support you while you support your kid navigating these challenging systems. And think about who you can talk to without feeling like they're passing judgment, right? In the same way that it's not a survivor or a teen's fault if they experience abuse, it's also not a parent's fault if their kid ends up in the situation, right? We try to educate, we try to teach, but sometimes things just happen. And there shouldn't be guilt or shame around protecting them from this. We just want to, that's why it's so important that we have open channels so that if something does happen, we can do our best to fix it and to help once we know what's going on. Great. So, some good conversation starters and questions. I've littered these throughout the presentation, but having this conversation, what are some of your boundaries? How do you enforce those boundaries? You could teach your kids the difference: emotional boundaries with your feelings, space boundaries with your body. People need to respect your ideas, or your intellectual boundaries. People need to respect your stuff, your material boundaries. People have to respect your time. Those are time boundaries. And you could even, play a game, right? Write on a beach ball different types of boundaries and throw it in the air and have them identify what boundaries look like to them. And ask them, is there anyone in your life that's testing your boundaries, pressuring you when you say no? How can we have a conversation with that person? How can we stay strong when we're experiencing pressure, right? And still advocate for our needs and for ourselves. What do you think are some red flags in relationships, right? And you could teach them that abusive relationships are about control, right? And it's all kind of builds on each other, right? That you should feel respected, that you should feel safe, that if someone's really jealous, if they're trying to keep you from your friends, if they're putting you down with their words or their actions and making you feel bad about yourself, those are red flags. If they're trying to monitor you 24/7 and know where you are at all times, that's a red flag. And then go into what they think makes relationships healthy or unhealthy. And finally, a really important question to ask before you even hear anything is, what would you do if you were in a relationship that didn't feel safe with a friend, right? With someone you're dating? How would you handle that? And we would hope that their answer would be, I would talk to you, right? Or I would talk to a safe, supportive adult in my network. I would talk to a guidance counselor, right? Even if it's not you, do they have a safe person that they can confide in, that has got their back, has got them covered, and can help take care of them? These are just some safety planning, important discussions that we should be having. I think I flew pretty fast through the presentation, but we have some resources. So, of course, trusted adults are part of their network, part of their village, right? Teachers, guidance counselors, family members. But we also have the Teen Dating Abuse Helpline. It is very teen specific. So they can text Love Is to 22522, and there's a live chat box where they can share what's going on. I'm in a relationship, I feel unsafe, and they get feedback. Loveisrespect.org is a website that has tons of helpful articles, quizzes on relationships. They have a hotline. There's also the Trevor Project, the National Suicide Prevention Line, and Peaceful Pass in Gainesville is the local domestic violence resource. So anyone can call our helpline at any time and receive information on how to support an adult, to support a teen, to support anyone in their life. And of course, there's the crisis line. But thank you so much for your time and for listening. And if you have any questions, email Tina, or I can drop my email in as well. Thank you.
Okay, that was definitely very informative. We do have a couple parents on, or maybe students. So if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your webinar window, so we can give Miss Hannah an opportunity to respond to you. Um, and I think as parents, I think just us being aware. So Miss Hannah, what do you feel about um I guess when we say teenagers, I don't know, because I feel like this type of thing can be before
Yeah,
before teenage years start.
yeah.
Because I would say a lot of boys, you find that people will make excuses, and oh, they just like you. Or
Mm-hmm.
oh, they just don't, and these are for our younger girls, and some boys too. Because girls, they'll hit too.
Yeah.
And it is that excuse is made.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you, I guess, go about still checking your child's like cell phones and monitoring and different things like that? Because I think that when we think that our kids are one way, or when we think that they're fine and nothing is going on, and you get a hold of the phone and
Mm.
you check it and you kind of go through it and see, like, hey, I know that they don't talk to us, but it's so much social media and communicating with their friends a lot. And so when you check the cell phone, it's like, whoa. So, because I check cell phones all the way up until, because I have a 21-year-old now.
Mhm.
So like those high school years, I still monitored her cell phone. But what do you think as a parent, like where's that boundary at
Mm.
to make sure that it's still giving them whatever it is that they feel like they need, but also giving the parents a peace of mind to say, I mean, because I definitely let mine know, like, hey, I'm gonna check.
Right. Yeah, and that's every parent has their own preferences. And they have their right to do what they see fit to make sure that their kids are safe, happy, healthy, all of the above. I know that when I was coming up, I did enjoy that my mom did not check my phone, right?
Mhm.
But I noticed that those that curiosity. She always knew everyone in my world, right? That, oh, how is this friend? Tell me about them, right? I think that
Mhm.
you can discern quite a bit from asking the right questions.
Mhm.
Right? Like, oh, I noticed that you hang out with this person a lot. What do you guys do? What do you guys talk about? And monitoring their behavior patterns. Are they really secretive with their phone? Are they constantly texting this? Who are you texting? Right? I think that checking a phone might be necessary if you do suspect that something unsafe is going on.
Mhm.
But if you can give them that space with their phone, that might be great and ideal. But every parent has different plans, different needs, and there you might have to check in that way. It sounds like you have
Yeah.
before, and it's been important for you and your family.
Yeah, because I think when I notice like you aren't texting on your regular iMessage, but you're
Mm-hmm.
going through like Snapchat to text, and it's like, yeah, something doesn't seem right. You know what I mean? So it's almost
Yeah.
like, as parents, and it was nothing going on. However, that's kind of like a red flag, for a parent to say, "Hey, let me check and see because are you being secretive or,
Mm-hmm.
something like that." So I just want, to kind of let parents know like, yes, there are boundaries and things like that you might want to set for yourself and for your child. But if you really feel that need to say, hey, let me hold that phone, or make sure that you're monitoring it, because our kids, there it's not the same like time frame from when we were growing up and going through
Mm-hmm.
high school and things like that, because we didn't have a lot of this social media, and we didn't have a lot of these different avenues to connect with all of these different people, not even at our school. Might not even, you might not even know. And I think also making sure, just like you said, as a parent, knowing who your child is hanging
Yeah.
out with and communicating with
Mm-hmm.
is definitely important, because you would hope that they're around a good group of kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just have to, I think you have to keep your eyes open, out of all of the things that we already have going on, but making sure that we keep our eyes open for our kids, because I think that level of having that communication, and
Mm-hmm.
letting them know that, hey, you can come to me. And I love the conversation starters, because that was one of my, I was like thinking
Yeah.
like, should you put it like on a refrigerator or
Mm.
something like that, to say, if you feel like you need to talk to me, or if you don't know, if you use one of these prompts, then I know we need to take a moment and we need to really sit down and talk, because I know the hustle and bustle of parents and kids, and
Mhm.
everybody's kind of in and out and doing their own thing, or with sports or whatever, work and all of that stuff. But maybe, I don't know, what do you think? If it
I love the idea of kind of gamifying it, because that could be a great way to have quality time, but you could turn it
Mhm.
into a game. And I brought up in the presentation, like putting it on a beach ball and throwing the beach ball around, and wherever your
Yeah.
thumb lands, you have to answer a question. Or you could have them like, you could draw out red flags and have them write about it, or make it funny, right? You could even Google games or make a Kahoot, or, just kind of, I know that sounds silly, but um, finding a way to start these conversations in a way that's engaging and it's not like,
Mhm.
whatever, right? Like,
Yeah,
so that
yeah.
you can
And
kind
it's
of get
lightening
a,
the mood too. Yeah.
yeah, to
Because it can
lighten
get
it.
very heavy,
Mm-hmm.
but just in order for me to even like have this conversation with you, or, I don't even know if a letter, hey, it's, if you incorporate that like um in your daily like lives, like once a month, write a letter. Like
Yeah.
write me a letter and tell me what's going on, or
Oh, I
something
love
that you feel
that.
like you can't, you wouldn't normally talk and say to me, like, write it down, and then we can, I'm
That's
just
awesome.
thinking of ways because I have such a range of girls.
Mm,
So I have that 21-year-old, then I have 13, and then I have a 5-year-old. So
mm.
so there's a range of what I would talk to that 21-year-old about. I mean, I
Yeah.
talk to that the 13-year-old about, and because they're just in different spaces.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, and just from listening to you, like kind of like brainstorming different
Hmm.
ways to bring it out and be able
Yeah.
to talk about those healthy boundaries and relationships with others. So yeah.
Yeah. And, I think that it can be kind of fun, it can be casual, but it can also be sincere, right? Why do you think I'm talking to you about this? Why do you think this matters? Does this matter? Because sometimes kids need to know that there is gravity to it and that, there's kind of two sides, right? It can be fun, but we could
Mhm.
also say, I'm talking to you about this because I love you and because this is actually really important. And you could, from a developmental perspective, talk about the consequences of what it looks like if your boundaries aren't respected, or that sometimes relationships can be unsafe, right? And having
Yeah.
that conversation. Have you ever thought about that? It's true. Obviously we don't want to tell, I mean, you can actually have these conversations with all ages. It's about
Mhm.
scaffolding, right? We could talk to a 5-year-old about consent. We could
Mhm.
model consent with a 5-year-old. Can I tie your shoe? Right? How do you feel if I give you a hug? Right?
Right,
Does
right.
that make you feel happy? Does that make you feel icky? And identifying those feelings.
Yeah, that's good. That's real good because I
Hmm.
think even with my 5-year-old, I often hear her teacher say, "Is it okay if I hug you?"
Yeah.
So absolutely. And that I think when you have several adults in a child's life that is giving that to them,
Mm,
so I would say never be afraid to if this is what you're practicing in your home,
yeah.
then tell those others around you like, hey, this is what we're practicing in my home, and even like at family functions and church events
Hmm.
and things like that, like, hey, this is, and so you give that parent or that other adult, hey, this is what we're practicing. If she doesn't
Yeah.
want to hug,
Yeah.
this is what we're talking to her about. So don't you
Yeah.
feel a way about it.
It's
This
not
is,
personal, right?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
with other adults, you can get real, right? You can get real with
Yes.
them. Why do you think I'm teaching them this?
Right, right.
Right?
That's good.
Because it's far too common for even kids' boundaries to be violated in a very terrible way, right? Like, I want
Yeah.
my kid to know that their feelings matter and they can say no because it follows them for the rest of their life.
Yeah. That's good. That's real good.
Hmm.
So I still don't see I don't see any questions.
Okay.
But if they want to connect with you or someone within your organization, I see that excuse me. All of the contacts are there.
Yeah.
So if you were on with us or you end up joining and watching later and there is just something that you just need to reach out, we didn't discuss or we tapped on and didn't go into depth of what you need, please feel free to reach out. We want to make sure that our parents are aware. We want to make sure that our youth are aware and make sure that we keep our kids safe.
Hmm.
So please feel free to reach out. There's no judgment. We are here. There's no weird or crazy question that you can ask. We are definitely here and want to make sure that we tackle whatever it is um that your family may be going through. So please reach out. So I won't hold us any longer for the evening. I'll go ahead and close us out. If there is nothing else that you can think of, Miss Hannah. Um,
No, I think you said it.
All
And
right.
yeah, let us know if you have any questions, and thank you for watching.
All right. So
Mhm.
thank you again for joining tonight's webinar. Each Thursday, you can join me back here for more informative presentations just like this one. Again, my name is Tina Folston Hayes, and I'm the Parent Academy Specialist for Alachua County Public Schools. And I look forward to seeing you back here on next Thursday, again at 6. That is where I will be. So I hope to see you back. Keep an eye out on all of the things that will be coming up in the months to see if they are interest to you. And if there is a subject that you would like me to find a host to bring us some information, please feel free to do that as well, because I want to make sure that I am providing the information that you all need. And so thank you again for joining us, Ms. Hannah. As always, thank you for coming back. We love to have you
Yeah.
again. So look for that invitation and have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.